All right, and I think we are live and on the air. Welcome to the Wake Up Call, where you will find the education, encouragement, and inspiration to change your mind and change your health. The Wake Up Call is an outreach of the Bhakti Wellness Center. And we're here today with the premiere edition of Wake Up Call Live, which I don't know if that's what we're going to call it down the road, but we'll see. It sounded catchy when I thought of it the other day. It's basically, this is going to be a way for us to, oh, and by the way, I should introduce, I've got my co-host here, Guy Odishaw. Hi, Guy.
Hello. Good to be with you, Rob.
He's going to be joining us today. We're having a little discussion on this. Basically, if anybody's listened to our broadcast show, we're on AM 950 out of Minneapolis, Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. And there's so many times we get to the end of that hour, and we're just like, man, there's so much more we want to say about this topic. So hopefully these webcasts are going to give us a little venue for doing that, where we can expand on a topic maybe covered on air, as well as bring new original content. And we're hopefully going to try to do this on a regular basis, and maybe some special events here and there. We're just kind of getting started on this, so we'll see where it all goes. Tonight, though, we're starting out with a discussion that actually started a couple years ago. I happened to listen to the show I did recently on sugars and other sweeteners. I was out for a walk, and it came up on my playlist. And there was a point that you made during that show about, I think somebody brought up the idea of in moderation. And then you brought up the whole idea of optimum minimum. And so we want to explore that a little bit. But first I want to get some of my thoughts on, maybe for you, Guy, when you hear, and I pose this to our listening audience, hopefully we can maybe get some comments here. And if you're watching live, there is a Q&A option on here. You can submit some questions to us while we're live streaming this. You can also use Twitter. If you use the hashtag WCLive, I'm going to try to watch that a little bit. But bear with us because this is our first time doing this, so we're working out the kinks here. So anyway, or comment on the broadcast itself, and we'll see how it goes. So in moderation, Guy, just to throw this at you for a second, since you're the only one here with me, when you hear the term in moderation, what does that mean to you? We always talk about, so-and-so is good in moderation.
Sure. Well, I get a pretty literal, like, moderation. So right away my mind kind of goes to ideas of extremes and then falls someplace in the middle. But that's a completely subjective criteria. I mean, it's just in moderation. I think it means something. Like, my first response is like, oh, of course. But if I really think about it, then I realize I have no idea what that means.
That's right. That's kind of where I was looking at it too. What does it really mean? Because I think the key is, though, without a baseline of some sort, it really doesn't mean much. And so when you just throw that out there, we'll say sugar is fine to have in your diet in moderation. Well, what's in moderation compared to what? Right. I think is the key thing.
Yep. Yeah. So it doesn't have within it a quantifiable bit. I mean, and if we compare this, and I don't know if you're ready to kind of walk into the comparison of my favorite phrase, minimum optimum, and this idea of in moderation. But that's what, for me, why when I heard from my teacher this concept of minimum optimum, it really it landed on me in a way I was like, oh, that works for me. That has in it this directive and a quantifiable, at the very least, in the form of the minimum.
Sure.
And I may not always know what the optimum is, but minimum I get. It's so to me that works more. It gives me a place to stand versus moderation.
Yeah, we'll get there in just a second. I think for me, the whole in moderation thing, it's like you said, it sounds good. It sounds like it should mean something. But when we really get down and think about it, it is. It's hard to quantify. It's hard to really pinpoint just what exactly that means. And I think, like when we get into the other concept, it is going to mean different things for different people. But I think even when I try to pinpoint what it means for myself, even that I'm not sure I can really quite figure out. So yeah, let's get into the term. And you left for me. I probably went back and forth on it between optimum, minimum, optimum when I was getting ready for today. Which one is it? And how did you come to hear about it? You mentioned from one of your teachers.
Sure. Yep. For one of my teachers, it's Adida, and he writes about it in his book called The Eating Gorilla, which is largely about diet, but diet in more of a like on a spiritual path. So the diet is perhaps more restrictive than what we would recommend to somebody if we were talking about nutrition or even just about health. This diet is more along the lines of what you would see maybe the yogis would eat, something that is designed for that kind. So not to tie it to that, our conversation, we're just pulling out of the Eating Gorilla this concept of minimum optimum. And, for me, it's, well, there's a number of things that tie into it. I mean, the general kind of philosophy is this idea of minimum. So what's the minimum you need? Whatever it might be, calories, protein, fat, carbohydrates, root beer, whatever you want to put in there, right? What's the minimum that you need? And then the other side of the equation is optimum, for the optimum outcome, for the optimum result. And it's bringing those two pieces of it together that turn this little phrase into a very potent philosophy. It becomes, it even has, I think we'll get into, ideas of ecology in it, and around the minimum optimum and how do we sustain living on a planet. It doesn't just have to be about health and wellness. We could talk about ecology, and the approach is the same. It works. It's scalable.
Well, and I think on the surface too, when you first bring this up, it also doesn't really seem to have a frame of reference for it, at least not one that would be universal. I think, again, this is another concept that is really individualized, and so you have to look at, because what's optimum for me, let's take protein, for example. What's optimum for me may not be optimum for you. I was talking with my mom about this a little bit ago, sugars, because that's how the whole idea came up. She's pre-diabetic. She's taking medication and doing different things to help her with that. So when it comes to sugar intake, what's optimum for her is definitely not going to be optimum for me. So it is another one of these sort of nebulous concepts. But I think this, from what I've been just pondering on it from knowing you and from talking to you, I think it has a little more validity, I guess, or something a little more solid behind it to build upon for your individual use.
It does. It invites you into this inquiry. That's how we would say it, right? It invites you to this inquiry to really consider what is the minimum and what is the optimum. And within optimum, it takes you to this place of well, what is my goal? For this, and you can talk about like the difference between you and I, and what our protein intake might be. But I'm thinking about, for myself, when I was a competitive athlete, there were times when maybe what I was trying to do was build muscle, and that was my primary goal. Well, I would look at my diet and say, what is my protein intake? And the optimum there was different than when I was finished with that phase and I didn't want to build anymore. And actually, as it turned out, what I wanted to do was lose a little bit, because I went up a weight division and it didn't go well. So I wanted to go back down a weight division, right? So the idea of what was optimum changed, right?
It's that sliding scale that I think just fits with life, because we're never here in this moment exactly. We're always moving to the next one. And like I said, with goals, our goals change depending on, hopefully as we reach one goal, we go towards others. Like you said, your goal was to get up a weight class. That goal, even if it had worked out great for you, there would probably been a time in your life where you're ready to move past that goal and move on to the next one.
Right, absolutely. Like when I transitioned from competing to not competing, my whole orientation to food had to change because the reference point completely changed. From very active competitive athlete to more, much more kind of sedentary. So now it's optimum is what's optimum for a business person, right? So I have to reconsider it completely. It's my diet now is nothing like my diet then.
So
And
how did you when this first presented you? Were there certain things, steps you took, or anything like that, as far as for putting this into practice in your life?
sure, and I mean, it to me, this idea of minimum optimum is it's a living question. It may be that it gets answered for a while, but because the idea is minimum and optimum, then there's always this tension between the question of, on the minimum side, where am I? Because it's not about deprivation, right? That's not what we're saying, is to deprive yourself. But the other side of that is to not indulge, right? And so you find what's the minimum that you need, and then to get this optimum result. But then over there, that's always changing of what is optimum, what is it weighed up against, right?
Sure.
So,
Well, and as far as that minimum too, I mean that can be, it can come from different areas. What's the minimum to satisfy a craving in the sense of maybe sugars or fatty foods or other things that are considered not as healthy maybe, or conversely, well, I guess conversely, is there a way to look at it as a maximum too? I mean, how do you differentiate maybe between what is the minimum I can have to satisfy, say, my cravings for chocolate, while I'm working towards the goal of maybe losing a few pounds, getting to a healthier weight, versus what's the most I can have and still meet my goals?
right, and under minimum optimum, of course, the ask of that is that you're always looking to go down. You mean you're always looking for what's the minimum. And that may bring into question the what is the maximum, right? But hopefully what you're always doing is that the self-discipline of this question, what is the least that I need?
Okay.
And this doesn't have to just apply to food. I mean, we're talking about it today in that context, but lifestyle, the house that you live in, right? And how big does it need to be? Do you need 800 square feet, 1,600 square feet, 3,200 square feet? I mean, I'm not saying that, like this idea that somebody should come along and just say, 1750. That's the ideal house, right?
Sure.
You should have. But no, that's not what we're asking for. But if people really conscientiously apply this, you find out, and that's what I love about it. It is an ask to become conscious on many, many, many levels. And again, the optimum side, what that does is, whether we're talking about food or, again, the size of my house, it's not just what's optimum for me. The sphere of that expands. What's optimum for my family? What's optimum for my community? What's optimum for the city? What's optimum for the state? All of those can, inform the answer to that question of optimum.
Sure, and it's funny you bring up the housing situation. For folks that listen to our broadcast show, they know I moved from Minnesota out to Washington State back in June, and I've been getting settled in out here. In Minnesota, I was living for years in a 2-bedroom house with a nice big large 2-car garage, and I had that place stuffed to the gills, just with me. Now that I'm out here in Washington, I'm settled back into my own place. I have a little apartment, 1-bedroom apartment that's, if it's 400 square feet, I'm lucky. and I am finding what is my minimum optimum for my personal living situation, for what I can get by with comfortably and be happy with, and still do the things that I want to do, with my health coaching practice or whatever. So yeah, that speaks to a lot of what I've been going through just these last few months, and not just with my housing, but with the possessions around me. For example, I've made a conscious decision not to buy a microwave oven for my new place, things like that. So I mean, I know there's a lot of different varying ideas about the use of microwave ovens, but for me, it's just, for one, I don't know where I would put it right now because of my space. But on the other hand, it's part of my optimum decision, I guess, process for how I want to prepare my foods on that level. So yeah, I mean, I guess that was something I started putting into practice without even really realizing it as I made this transition out west here.
Right. Yes, and that's again why I love it as a concept. Is there's no place it doesn't apply. It invites us to really consider how we are participating in our life. So like in the more immediacy of what I'm doing, what's relevant to me, but then also I have an impact on the person around me, the people around me, on the environment around me, and this invites me into a consideration of these questions, right? And the other thing preparing for this, that came to my mind was thinking about the Buddhist image of the hungry ghost, right? So the hungry ghost is got the small little mouth, it's a little mouth and a big belly, right? And the it can never get enough in through that little mouth to satisfy that belly, so it represents all of our greed and envy and jealousy and addiction and obsession. Those qualities are represented by the hungry ghost. And that this idea of minimum optimum is really a counterbalance, right? It invite us into an inquiry on where are we with those qualities in our life. What is the check and balance to my own greed and envy and jealousy and desire, and this idea brings that up. It puts me right into that. Right.
So say somebody, is this something actually too? Do you use any of this in some of your practice with maybe with your meditation or even part of your bodywork practices?
Absolutely, I do. Yes. So in all of my classes, my students will hear me talk about minimum optimum. Right now I'm doing a yoga theory course, so we're covering the 8 limbs of yoga. The whole 8 limbs of yoga are premised on this equation of the minimum optimum. What's the minimum optimum amount of meditation? What's the minimum amount of asana practice? What's the minimum amount relative to diet? All of these life considerations that practice like that invites us to. This is the fulcrum that practice is balanced on, rather than prescribing. Right? Many paths or methods go to prescription because it's easier. People like that. You just tell them what to do. Here are the rules. Here are the guidelines. Follow this. You'll be okay. And I'm much more of an advocate of the conscious process. I want people to become consciously connected to their behaviors and their motivations, their environment, and their impact. And to me, minimum optimum puts you right up against that.
Well, you mentioned it begs the question. I mean, is there maybe like an exercise that you do with your students in class to help them figure out what is that question?
Well, yes. I mean, there's series. Is it series?
Series I? I don't know. What's the plural of series?
Of exercises that they do, but it would start with whatever the particular area that we're looking at is. So let's say we're talking about sleep, right? And we want to get this idea of of sleep. Like, how much sleep do I need? Because I can't function in my life and do all the things I want to do if I'm not getting enough sleep. But same is true, like just getting more isn't the answer, nor is it good. So it might be, say, sleep is the thing. We start to look at, what do they know about it? What are their ideas about it? What are their beliefs? What are their self-images around how much sleep they think they need? What are their habits and patterns? And then we begin to challenge those. Is that true? Is one of the favorite questions that I have. Is that true? And we just kind of keep doing that. And it isn't necessarily something that you solve just sitting in a chair thinking about it, but they're invited to actually then put it into practice and then come back and we do the exercise again. And over a period of a few weeks or a few months, there's a great deal of self-awareness that comes up that wasn't there before. And we go through, each facet just like that.
So I suppose there's probably some experimentation going on here and there. And do you maybe make use of journals? I know in the case of, say, working towards healthier eating and a healthier weight, a lot of people are a big advocate of keeping food journals that not only talk about, where you not only log what it is you're eating and how much, but also how it makes you feel afterwards, both in the form of like satiety, but also emotionally. So, going back to the sleep example, would you then suggest they keep logs of their sleep patterns, maybe including the times they're going to bed, the times they're waking up, and how rested they feel again the next day, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think those kinds of structures are really helpful. And some people have a more natural inclination towards that, and some don't. But I think it's a great support for people to do that, just because of the way the mind is. It can play tricks on itself. And although it might be true, you can remember, I can remember this week how it was last week, but 6 months from now, I won't remember how it was last week. And that's where having the journal can be so helpful, because you look back and go, oh yeah, that's right. That's how it was for me. I forgot that. I think it's a great idea.
And I suppose when you're looking for that optimum, you can't simply look at the quantities, whether it be sugars or amount of sleep and things like that. You really do have to get in to the emotional side of it, because that's really what's going to help you decide where that optimum is how it affects you, how you feel as a result of the changes you're trying to make.
Right. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's about the emotional. It certainly includes that,
physical,
how you feel. But it is that whole package, just kind of form and function, the feeling and the function, and to really find out what's true. And I was vegetarian for well over a year, and I tried a few times and it fell off the wagon. Tried a few times, fell off the wagon, and then finally I kind of learned all the things I needed to learn, how to cook and really be able to eat and enjoy it, and that all helped. And I had a good solid year, but I didn't. I kind of knew I didn't really feel that good, but I had this belief in my mind that I should. I'm eating a vegetarian diet. I should feel good. I should feel great. And then one day I decided, what? I think I'm going to have some chicken. And I ate some chicken, and I was like, oh my God, I feel so good. Like, just this return of energy and vitality and my ability to just live my life, because I lived a pretty active life. I work a lot of hours, physical work. And I was just like, okay, I'd handled the minimum side of the equation well, but I hadn't handled the optimum side very well. So I added in some chicken, and that just handled it.
So I suppose it's good. Brings up a good point. The bare minimum, is not always the optimum. So it is about finding that balance, I guess you'd say, between, or maybe is it more the relationship between your personal minimum and your personal optimum?
Absolutely, and I would put that in the form of what's true. is the way I look at that. Is it's like, what's true for you? And again, truth isn't a place on a map. To me, truth is kind of it's like a harmonic. When you're in harmony, when everything is just kind of in sync, that's how you can kind of tell, that the truth is there.
That's your personal truth.
Your personal truth, And so I wasn't in my optimum, and in a way I could feel it, but I was fighting it, was resisting it because I had this idea in my mind about being vegetarian. It wasn't a really strong one, like some really rigid belief or some ideology, but I was really just kind of trying it on. And when I was willing to let go of the form and listen to what was there, then I got to a place of like, oh yeah, I feel much better. But it didn't mean that I went like completely back to the way I was before. Like I didn't drop all my good habits going, well, this vegetarian thing is terrible, it's a terrible thing, and I didn't just, jettison it. I just ate basically the same way, but started to put a little bit of chicken in, but with the same idea. What's the minimum optimum that I need? Probably don't need to eat half a chicken at every meal.
Or even chicken every day.
Or even chicken every day, exactly. It's really about finding what did I need, but then it's this resisting the urge to make that into a rule. Like, oh, okay, so I find that, 12 ounces of chicken a week, that seems to work. Then I just think, okay, for the rest of my life, I eat 12 ounces of chicken a week. Like, there, I did it. I just turned it into a rule.
Yeah.
And I've lost the minimum optimum, the philosophy, which is I'm just always open to that's a dynamic question.
Well, so do you think this is a concept that has a moving target versus more of just a fluid dynamic? And I guess by that I mean or maybe it's even a little of both, because there's that target that is going to change over time, of course, but it's always, to me, I guess when I say moving target, I'm looking at it as something that's always just kind of just out of reach, versus a fluid dynamic that just naturally ebbs and flows with the tides of life, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it is a both. In to use these terms, that my biochemistry, your biochemistry, everybody's changes all the time, just does, right? Mm-hmm. And so you want to be fluid around that, be able to be responsive to it. But then also, it goes back to that thing of what are you doing in your life? And if you have a change, that's the target. In this moment, I'm taking that as the target. Is what is the underpinnings of my optimum? And presuming that your target, like right now, mine is around health-related things. So exercise, food, my my own kind of self-care program, meditation. That is all kind of geared around being a business owner and living that life. But at some point, hopefully, right, this particular way that I'm living is going to change. And then my target will change, right?
Sure. Just even over, say, the course of the time we've been on the air. It's hard to believe. By the way, I missed our anniversary. The Wake Up Call has now been on the air for over 3 years. So congratulations on that. So I guess kudos all around that. But you've had shifts and change. The Bhakti Wellness Center has had a lot of changes over the last year as well. You brought in Dr. Drew Litchie and just some of the things you guys have going on there. So I suppose that has probably provided you a lot of opportunity for matching your minimum optimums to these moving targets that you had happening in your life.
Absolutely. What my lifestyle was like when we had 400 square feet and 2 treatment rooms and 2 providers, to what it was like when we had 5 treatment rooms and 12 providers, to 10 treatment rooms and 20 providers, the demands on me have changed, and therefore I've had to keep switching around my formula, and for just how I live, like how much exercise, how much meditation, the nature of my diet. And you would think it would be, well, work is a lot more stressful, so I'm going to get more exercise and meditation. But it didn't go that way. Right? Because for me, there's just certain realities, right? Which is the demand of work and the place the business is. I mean, we just had this conversation with Dr. Litchi, my partner in the business, right? Of just saying, look, we're certain kind of business owners right now. We're the owners of a business that doesn't make any money. So this requires us to behave in a certain way. In a year or in 2 years, we'll be owners of a business that is making money. Well, now we get to change, and how we live our lives will be different. But we won't get to where we want to if we pretend that we can live our life now like we want to live it then.
And that is something that I think can apply. Whether we're talking, we started this conversation talking about dietary optimums. Whether it's sugars, proteins, fats, whatever. What your minimum optimum is now, based on, say you're in a position where you want to lose a few pounds because you're facing down maybe something like pre-diabetes or something like that, or you want to eliminate sugars because of a situation like that. Whatever it is, it sounds like, as soon as you get close to that goal is going to change automatically for you anyway. So, yeah, I guess that is where the whole fluid part of this comes in, and it's something you can't just do and file it away as, okay, there it is, but rather it almost takes a constant monitoring to make sure that you are maintaining the optimum, I guess it would be.
Right, exactly. And that, again, to me, that's part of the brilliance in this formula, minimum optimum, is if you really embrace it, if you don't just turn it into a set of rules
or a catchphrase,
or a catchphrase that
I feel, that's where I feel in moderation has become more than anything.
Absolutely, right. But if you really engage this, it will take you to an answer in a way that I think, even in moderation, if you even engage that earnestly, it just doesn't take you into the same place. This idea of moderation, because clearly here there's a demand minimum, and again, I don't care whether we're talking about food, calories, types of calories, sources of calories, or if we're talking about energy, and how much energy do I use in the sense of heating my home or driving my car, right? That to me, that there is no doubt that we as a species will do better if everybody was more towards the minimum end of consumption. Sure. than even whatever moderation is, and certainly the other end more around the just maximum, just use as much as you can.
Well, a good example is that, unfortunately, back there in Minnesota, you're facing winter down once again, and predictions are it's going to be another brutally cold one. So let's look at, your heat settings. What is the minimum you can set your thermostat to and still maintain a comfort in your household for you and your family?
Right.
That might be a good way to looking at it. And it's not something, and even that changes throughout the day, because what that is going to change whether you guys are at home for the evening or whether or when you're gone during the day, as well as the outside influences like the weather. If it's a sunny day in Minnesota, that sun still has a lot of power to warm up your house, or if it's just one of those cold snaps where the temperatures don't get above zero for a few days. Again, it's going to add to that whole fluidity of the situation. Right.
And who's in control of the thermostat, me or my wife? Right? It's yes. Me. It's at 65. If it's her, it's at 72 or 75. And how we negotiate that and the give and take, but that's again, that's what this invites us to. Because there's certainly, there's people who aren't engaged in it at all. They just want to be comfortable, and they just turn that thermostat up to whatever, 74, and just let
it rip.
go, whatever. Absolutely, it's just, I want to be comfortable. I don't care. Well, that's fine. But to me, the what's important and valuable in this idea of minimum optimum is that it's an invitation. It's a call to consciousness to say, well, think about it. Do you need 74? Can you get by with 70 and slippers? And is that an okay compromise? And to me, that's just so important. It's why we do this show. Our other show is this idea. Why it's called the wake up call, because we want to invite people to this conscious process. And that's what minimum optimum, to me, that's what it does. It is a constant call to consider what you're up to. And
that brings up a good idea, or a good part of the whole concept too. Is it's not just focused on a singular thing. It's that interaction between the different aspects in your life, whether it's your heating and how that affects the bill that you pay, because that has a trickle-down effect to other things in your life, like whether you're going to be able to afford that new TV or enough, I guess you could say even for some cases enough food to put on the table, things like that. You have to balance those things as well when it comes to your dietary habits. Someone may decide that when it comes to things like sugars and things like that, that they're okay with a higher minimum, even if it does prevent them from losing as much weight as they would want, because that satisfies a certain need in them that maybe is more important to them at this time than that number on a scale.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's a safer thing to allow for the person who knows that that's what's being done than the person who doesn't know, right? Again, this idea of being conscious about that. I've gone through phases where I was sugar-free, wheat-free, dairy-free, that whole thing, and now I'm not. But I went too far in the direction of, just having whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and not worrying about it. Now swinging back in the other direction, but I don't feel the need to kind of go into the deprivation side of it anymore. Kind of some idealistic way of being that it must be better because it's so extreme. But to actually be in the minimum optimum, and it's like, hey, if I'm going to have a couple of cookies, I'm going to have a couple of cookies. It's like, that's true of my health. I can do that. Now, that might not be for somebody else, for all kinds of reasons. Diabetics and worrying about insulin levels. It could be that, or it could be the person that if they have 2 cookies, they know they can't stop. And so the 2 is going to lead to 10, and that's a problem. So for them, the minimum optimum is 0.
Yeah, and that can apply to so many things, whether it's food items, trying to smokers, to alcohol consumption, to shopping even. How many purses or pairs of shoes does your wife need? That sort of thing.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the thing I love about it. Is it across the board? It invites one to that question. Friend of mine is helping a girlfriend kind of clean up her closet, and just rounds and rounds of stuff coming out of her closet, still with the tags on it, never been used, but yet it was purchased, went into the closet, sat there, never used, and thousands of dollars in clothes and purses and shoes that were like that. That I'm fairly confident that is not the minimum optimum. Like I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong because it's a very personal thing, but I think that's a place where minimum optimum could be applied to say, I think the excess here is showing that your minimum is actually lower than what you think it is.
And like you said, or if nothing else, it begs the question to look at it. I mean, who knows? Maybe there is some sort of need that is being fulfilled there, and that could be fine as long as I guess, as long as it balances with the other goals and needs in her life at that time.
Right, exactly. I mean, if it's that versus beating the children, hey, buy more purses.
Sure.
And if buying the purses aren't, preventing the kids from getting the education they need or being in the activities they need, if it's not a problem, okay, so that's the thing about it. It's not to just come in with a judgment from the outside that says shopping is bad, No, but it is to say apply the formula,
Well, I mean, maybe that's the important thing here. We can maybe kind of start wrapping things up because I don't want to just keep going around in circles on this, but maybe that's the important thing is just asking the question, looking at these things where it becomes a like you said, a conscious part of the process and not just these unconscious actions in our life.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, to me, that's kind of the answer to everything, right? For me, is the answer to every question is more consciousness. Whatever you look into, the solution always arises out of a growth in awareness, and so that's universally true. So we can look at that and say, okay, then in my own life, whatever problem I have, the solution to it is a growth in awareness, a growth in consciousness. It's always the answer. And again, that's why I love Minimum Optimum, is because it invites us to that process.
And maybe the first step in that is just not being afraid to ask the questions.
Yeah, not being afraid to turn in and look. And on one side, the optimum is just being clear about what my goal is here. Why am I doing this? Oh, that's why. Okay. Then what's going to get me my best results in this? These are fairly simple questions and not that scary. Like the other night when I was looking for something to really kind of I needed a fix. I was in a very agitated state, and I knew I needed something, to self-medicate. And there was a range of options that I could, partake in. And I just asked myself, well, what's my optimum choice here? And what I came up with is one that I use frequently is cookies. Right? It's like I'm not going to do any damage to anybody else. Like historically, it might have been drinking, and then that might have involved somebody else and had an impact beyond myself. So, cookies was this only affects me. And then within that, I knew I was doing that. I knew why I was doing it. Decided cookies was the optimum way to go about, self-medicating. And then what was the minimum number of cookies I needed to reach that point where I felt like freed from my angst. And, I found out it was like around 12 Oreos. And then I was like, okay, I'm done. I could eat the rest of them, but I'm done. They've done their job. I feel it. Like there was my, the angst is gone.
And I suppose even in that moment, it's important to keep yourself focused on that so that you could have easily gone for 15, 20 or more cookies without even realizing you'd already hit that minimum if you'd have just done it in a mindless manner. But keeping yourself aware and in the inside of that moment as it was happening to you, you were able to recognize, okay, boom, I'm at that 12th one. That's good,
Exactly, and I've done that in the past. Just eat the whole box, just out of an automaticity, and then feel much worse, just physically, from that much sugar, um, and then have to feel bad emotionally because overindulgence, blah, all of that. So it's not a very effective strategy. It's not optimum. But in this case, I was able to get there, be like, there it is. I've reached the point that I was looking for, right? Then I could take the box, close it up, put it in the garbage.
So now, is this something that maybe, you mentioned you teach a lot of classes. Is this something you go over because you do like the open meditation on Tuesdays? Is that, or if somebody wanted to learn more, can they contact you to find out more about how you use this in some of the classes you teach?
Absolutely, and I'm not probably on the website where you'll have this posted. There's a varying contact information website for the Wake Up Call, for the Wellness Center, and my information is in both those places. Happy to hear from people if they want to know more about it.
Yeah, probably the easiest way is through our website at thewakeupcallradioshow.com. It's on the banner here, and we'll have it linked on YouTube as well. So, and then you do a lot of this through the Bhakti Wellness Center, so we'll throw up a link up to the bhakticlinic.com for that. If you're in the Twin Cities area, is it every Tuesday night that you're doing your open meditation?
It is every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock at the Lake Harriet Spiritual Community on 44th and Upton.
Okay, and then you mentioned a book that your teacher originally. Can you do you remember the title on that? If somebody wants to maybe check that out,
sure,
for more information.
Eating Gorilla. This was the Eating Gorilla.
Eating Gorilla. Just
Gorilla.
hit that up on Google and you'll probably find it, right?
Yep. ADIDA. Adida. The Eating Gorilla. You'll find it.
Okay.
Definitely, if you look that up, read some of it online before you buy it.
Okay.
Just to say, it's not for everybody.
All right. If I can find I'll try to find maybe a link on Amazon or something for that for people to check out if they want to dive into it a little bit more. Well, thanks for joining me tonight, Guy. This is our kickoff to, like I said, I don't know if we'll end up calling it this the whole time, but the Wake Up Call Live. We're hoping to do this on a regular basis. And again, check out the broadcast on AM 950. It's Saturday mornings at 9 o'clock Central Time. You can listen to live in the Twin Cities, or they do stream over the net. Details are on our website at thewakeupcallradioshow.com. Just look for the Listen Now page. And beyond that, be sure to check out bhakticlinic.com for more information on Guy and what is it, 20-plus practitioners you guys have over there now?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, just going that game. When we started this show, 3 years ago, it was just a couple of you over there, so it's great to see the success going on over there. And I should say, this has been the Wake Up Call, where you'll find the education, encouragement, and inspiration to change your mind and change your health. And, it is about that mindset, that looking at things mindfully, that does help you really make those changes, take those steps towards making those positive changes in your health, no matter whether it's nutrition, your emotional well-being, or beyond. So we really hope it's been of some help to you guys. And Guy, thanks a lot, and we'll do this again real soon.
Thank you, Rob. It was fun.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.